Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 25 of my Joseph Losey season. Today we're going to 1974 or 1975, depending where you read, and Galileo, starring Topol. This is a Kino Lorber Region A, which was quite expensive, but I'm so glad I got it, because this is an absolute masterwork. You will see 1-star reviews of this film in places, but you'll also see 5-star reviews of the film, based on Bertolt Brecht's play, which Joseph Losey actually directed 28 years earlier, starring Topol, and I think it's the best thing Topol ever did. I mean, I know that is hard to imagine, because obviously he played Heinz Zarkov in Flash Gordon, which, as you all know, is perhaps the greatest film performance of all time. But I would actually say he might actually be better in Galileo. I know it's hard to imagine. It follows Galileo from 1609 into the 1640s, as he battles against the church for daring to suggest that the earth, that the universe doesn't revolve around the earth, and the earth's not the centre of the universe, and human beings aren't in the centre of the universe. It's sad to say that this is the 17th century and we're now in the 21st century and not much has changed. We've kind of went backwards. Religion is still a thing, bizarrely, and obviously flat earthers are a thing, even though if the earth was flat and the sun's there, then why isn't it just daytime all the time? But I digress. The film, the production design is by Richard MacDonald, and it's wonderful. It is artificial, it's stage bound, so you can kind of tell it's from a stage, but that artifice actually works really well, because it is a film about trying to tell the truth, working against reality, against the non-reality of people's beliefs. There's wonderful sets and set pieces, there's tremendous scenes. I'll just talk about some of the cast. So you've got Topol, obviously, in the title role, but you've also got Edward Fox, Colin Blakely, I'm going to have to look at my notes, I apologise, Clive Revill, John McInerney, John Gielgud, Michael Gough, Michael Lonsdale, Patrick McGee, Tom Conti, Madeline Smith turns up, Judy Parfitt turns up, and there's a host of British actors who get a couple of lines that you'll recognise their faces. I mean, it's almost like a Richard Lester cast. There's just so many people in it. Now, for example, John Gielgud just did A Day. You know, there'll be, you know, Edward Fox really just has a couple of scenes in which he's absolutely amazing in. So it's a huge cast, but it's kind of small budget. It's an American film theatre production, so a lot of the cast didn't really do or weren't paid a lot. They kind of did it just to do a Brecht film, essentially. It was co-written by Losey. Obviously he directed the play, as I said earlier. He was pals with Brecht, or worked with Brecht. So the film is fairly chronological, and Losey shot it in the sequence of the play, so Topol slowly gets older as the film goes on. It starts when he's 46, or Galileo's 46, and then it goes up to him being 80ish or in the early 80s. And it's a film that shouldn't really work. At points, Topol breaks the fourth wall and talks to the audience, or to the camera. There's a device, which I believe was in the play, of essentially a Greek chorus of three boys singing. One minor quibble, I would say, sometimes you have to put the subtitles on for the three boys singing because their voices are ridiculously high. There is a musical interlude about 2/3 of the way through the film with Clive Revel, as these kind of players are singing a song, pretty much singing about Galileo, which is fine, but it does kind of stop the momentum a little bit. The film is 145 minutes long, but it doesn't seem that way. It does fly by. I found it absolutely engrossing. I mean, Topol is just full of so much enthusiasm, as Galileo was, allegedly. But he is kind of naive. You know, he thinks, you know, he knows he'll share this knowledge, and of course the church will go, oh, that's fine, there's no God in the sky, we're not the centre of the universe anymore, the universe doesn't revolve around the earth because we're amazing. He somehow thinks they'll just change their doctrine and their way of controlling people overnight just because he says so. So as a kind of naive character, but over the course of the film, as he's beaten down, and then the Inquisition forces him to renounce these beliefs, and how he kind of gets his work out eventually. It's all fantastic. There's so many just excellent scenes. As I said, Edward Fox is wonderful as the kind of inquisitor of the church. He's got a scene with Galileo's daughter, who, because of his beliefs, damages her engagement, and basically ruins her life. She ends up as a nun, but obviously she's got religion, so everything's fine then. She's perfectly happy. Edward Fox has a scene with her that is one of the most threatening but seemingly helpful and seemingly charming, and it's after a kind of party they have to welcome Galileo, and Edward Fox has a pig mask that he waves about. It's a wonderful scene. He is so threatening, but again seemingly charming. There's a wonderful scene with Michael Lonsdale and Patrick McGee, again as cardinals, and one of them's got a sheep mask, the other one has an owl mask, and they're quoting scripture back and forth with Topol, and again it's that kind of threatening, oh, you can believe and you can expound all these theories, but of course we're not actually going to let you go public or start telling the poor people that there is no God and there's no actual point to their toil. We can't have that, because the poor people will get confused, but what they actually mean is the poor people might actually have their eyes opened and might revolt and kill everybody in the church, and we can't have that, obviously. I mean, it does have some moments of humour. There's a couple of just wonderfully pithy lines, but it is kind of a tragedy looking at it now, because sadly, watching it in 2023, we're still living in this kind of world, which is just astounding. I'm sure Galileo in the 17th century thought by the 21st century probably religion wouldn't exist and we'd get on with our lives without needing invisible friends, but apparently not. Of course, Topol we lost in March this year. As I said, it's it's a wonderful performance by him. But again, it's that fight against, if you have knowledge, do you share it with the state? If the state's just going to go, yeah, please shut up and don't tell people. The play was originally put up in 1942, and then 1947, but obviously 1947 was after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the point, or one of the points of the play, is kind of, if you have knowledge you should speak out, and then Brecht himself was kind of questioning, should scientists who know the truth and know things like how to bomb lots of people, should they maybe keep quiet? And that's the balance of the play and of the film, and that's why it's still relevant. Should we kind of bow to superstition, or should we actually try and get facts out, regardless of how unsavoury and how controversial and revolutionary those facts are? Or should we just continue to live in this ignorant little bubble, thinking that we're the centre of the universe? Again, people will have their different views on this. We see Galileo inventing the telescope, but probably the Chinese did that 200 years earlier. And we see the experiments with an ice cube in water and an iron needle in water. Tom Conti and John McKerney are amongst his kind of disciples and his kind of group. And Tom Conti is obviously really annoyed and disowns him when he renounces all his beliefs. That scene where they're preparing to hear whether he's renounced his beliefs or not, it's literally on a stage with a huge white light shone in a white background, so we see their shadows and their characters. Again, as I say, some of the sets are just beautiful. That reminds you a little bit of Ken Russell's The Devils, but perhaps not on the scale of the Devils sets. There's a wonderful scene with Michael Lonsdale and Edward Fox, because Michael Lonsdale becomes the next pope. Again, Topol is naive to think, oh, Michael Lonsdale knows a little bit of maths, he'll be open-minded, he'll change everything, which of course he doesn't. It's just a wonderful scene, beautifully framed, as Michael Lonsdale's getting dressed in all this ridiculous popery, not potpourri, and Edward Fox is kind of walking round him, pretty much begging him to let him torture Galileo so he can renounce. There's just so many beautifully written scenes, beautifully performed scenes. It's such a joy, for me at least, because after the last three Losey films that, to me at least, are a little bit middling, nowhere near my favourite Loseys. Galileo was a shot in the arm. Again, 145 minutes doesn't seem like it, and I'm glad I went for the Blu-ray, because the colours in the film, the set design, the production design is really wonderful, and the Blu-ray really brings it to the fore. So it's absolutely fabulous. Again, you may be in the group of 1-star reviewers, and that's fine, because we all see things differently. But Galileo, to me, is an example of why I enjoy doing this YouTube channel, why I love doing this YouTube channel, why I love doing director series. Because if I didn't decide to do a Joseph Losey director series, I would have probably never seen this, as I'm not a Topol completist. I would have never seen this. I would have never seen Boom, which again is another masterpiece, even though you might think it's a 1-star film, and that's absolutely fine. But I would have never watched these films if I hadn't done a Joseph Losey season, and that's why, again, cinema is fantastic, because even a film like, oh yeah, based on a play of Galileo, that won't be really good, will it? It's just such a great film. Again, some people might find it overlong. Again, some people might find it a little bit dry. But I was hooked immediately into Topol's enthusiasm, even though that enthusiasm eventually gets beaten out of him, like it does with all of us in real life. It just works, and it kind of speaks to the magic of cinema, because on paper it probably shouldn't really work as a film, but it's so good. The performances are so good, but sadly, tragically, it is actually still relevant. The same questions that Galileo was trying to bring up in the 17th century, we're still trying to let reason kind of win out, but we are living in a world where reason and sense doesn't seem to have as much say as it really ought to. But it's just such an interesting film, and again, it kind of sums up Losey, the fact that when he is engaged in his material, you know, there's so many of these films I've covered in this series where he was brought in at the last minute to replace somebody. He hated the script, he didn't like the producer, he had problems with the actors. But in the films that he's actually engaged, the films that he really likes the script, he makes great films. And again, that is the quandary. That's why I wanted to do the series in Joseph Losey, because what is his legacy? What kind of filmmaker is he in actual fact? The question still remains with 3 episodes left. The next episode is obviously probably my favourite Losey film, another one that I think is a masterpiece, one that I've done 2 videos on the channel, so this will be the 3rd video I've done on it. But Galileo is wonderful. The release by Kino is wonderful as well. Apart from the print, you get an interview with Topol, which is fantastic, because he actually talks about, they rehearsed as they would a play before filming, because again they just didn't have the time and budget, as is the case with quite a lot of Losey films. But there was a famous British actor who Topol doesn't name, and I've kind of looked. I haven't looked at the Losey book because I packed it away because I'm moving at some point, to find out who the actor was. But he said he's a beloved English actor, but he was drinking a little bit, and he was asking questions of Losey, and then Losey was like, have you been drinking? And the actor said yes, and Losey said, you're fired. And they were all a bit shocked. But when Topol spoke to Losey about it, he said, I don't have time. You know, if it was a bigger budget, then we could live with it, but we can't really live with somebody who's drinking and not really engaged with the project completely. So he fired this famous British actor. If you do know who that was, I know alcohol, everybody thinks, oh, it must have been Oliver Reed, but I don't know whether it was Oliver Reed or not. Maybe people more knowledgeable than I, which is probably everybody, will probably know who it is. But the interview with Topol is fantastic. There's an interview with Edie Landau, who's the partner of the producer, and there's a piece of Eli Landau, a promotional film for the American Film Theatre. There's a gallery of trailers for the American Film Theatre. But the Topol interview is absolutely wonderful. He actually does, or did sculptures for his characters in films. So he shows off a sculpture that he made of Galileo, because he thought, you know, as Galileo ages, he doesn't really want to spend hours and hours in makeup. So what he did, he just shaved his hairline and made his hairline higher and higher as the production went on, and that kind of shortened the time he was in makeup. He is a lovely, or he was a lovely man, and the interview brings that across. So that's Galileo, another slam dunk by Losey, at least for me. Again, perhaps another film that shouldn't really work. And as I say, Part 26 is a film that certainly works. But we'll talk about that when I do the video. So thanks very much for watching Part 25 of my Joseph Losey season, Galileo. Please let me know if you've seen it and what you think of it. And hopefully you'll join me again for Part 26, where a cinematic icon goes to Paris. This is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, saying farewell.